The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into Solomon's wrists as Officer Mark Olson shoved him into the back of the patrol car. The city lights blurred behind the dirty glass, but Solomon kept his gaze steady. There was no fear in his eyes, only the deep, aching weight of betrayal. Across the street, Amelia Hayes gripped her phone tightly. Her heart raced with disbelief and rage. She had seen police overreach before, but this was Professor Solomon Washington, the man who'd taught her that the law was a tool for justice, not oppression. And now, the very law he upheld was being twisted against him. She hit record, capturing every moment. Olson's smirk, the unnecessary force, the way no one intervened, as the patrol car sped off into the night. Amelia didn't hesitate. She started her engine, following at a distance. Her mind worked furiously. This couldn't end here. Inside the station, Olson dragged Solomon down the corridor. Officers glanced up but quickly looked away. The air was thick with unspoken complicity. Solomon was silent, his dignity intact, though his wrists throbbed beneath the cuffs. Olson threw him into a holding cell and slammed the door. "Bet you thought you were untouchable," he sneered. Solomon simply met his gaze. "Your badge doesn't make you bigger than the truth," he said quietly. For a moment, Olson faltered, but only for a moment. Amelia parked outside the station. She quickly sent the video to a colleague at a local news outlet. Her hand shook, but her voice was steady as she called internal affairs. Before she could finish explaining, a voice on the other end interrupted. "We're aware of the situation. Stay where you are. We're sending someone." Inside, Solomon sat in the dim cell, listening to the murmur of voices beyond the bars. He thought of his students, his lectures, the essays he'd written about justice, and wondered what lesson would come from tonight. Suddenly, raised voices echoed through the station. The front desk officer was arguing with someone. "Amelia, I want to see him." "Now," she demanded. "You're not authorized. You think I need authorization to check on my mentor after you people arrested him for no reason?" Before the argument could escalate, Captain Renee Morales emerged from her office, drawn by the commotion. She took one look at Amelia's face, then at the nervous officers around her. "Bring her in," Morales ordered. Amelia entered, her eyes blazing. Without a word, she handed the captain her phone. Morales watched the video, her expression darkening with each passing second. "This happened under my watch," she said, more to herself than to Amelia. Before she could act, the station doors burst open. Reporters poured in, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Someone had leaked the footage, and now the world was watching. Olson appeared from a hallway, his face pale as he saw the cameras. The confidence he'd worn like armor was cracking. "Get them out of here," he barked. But no one moved. Captain Morales stepped forward. "Enough," she said. Her voice was low, but it cut through the chaos. "Get Washington out of that cell. Now." But before the keys could even be found, a call came through the station's main line. The sergeant answered, his face draining of color as he listened. "Yes, sir. Yes, sir." "Understood." He turned to Morales. "That was the mayor's office. They're demanding a full report. They want Washington released immediately, and they want Olson suspended pending investigation." Morales nodded grimly. But as the officers hurried to comply, Amelia's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen and froze. A message from a journalist she'd contacted. "There's more. We've uncovered internal memos, evidence of targeting patterns, quotas, and cover-ups. This goes deeper than one arrest. Be careful." Amelia's pulse quickened. She looked at Solomon through the bars as the officers fumbled with the lock. This wasn't over. It was only the beginning. Amelia's eyes met Solomon's through the bars of the holding cell. The metallic clank of the unlocking door echoed through the station like the sound of walls falling. Solomon stepped out slowly, his posture straight despite the humiliation he had endured. His calm defiance in the face of injustice only magnified the power of the moment. Reporters surged forward, their cameras flashing like lightning. The light illuminated the grim faces of the officers, especially Officer Olson, whose earlier arrogance had dissolved into dread as the weight of public scrutiny bore down on him. Captain Renee Morales stepped into view, her voice firm as she addressed the crowd. Professor Washington has been released without charge. Officer Olson is suspended pending an internal investigation. We will ensure accountability. This department does not tolerate misconduct. Her gaze met Amelia's, a silent acknowledgement of the young woman's courage. Outside the station, the tension in the air was electric. Solomon paused beside Amelia as they passed the waiting cameras. "Thank you," he said quietly. "It's not over yet, Professor," she replied, holding up her phone. On the screen glowed the message from Marcus Thorne. "There's more. Memos, quotas, cover-ups. Be careful." That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. She pored over the files Marcus had sent, scanned memos, arrest reports, and internal emails. What she found confirmed her worst fears. Unofficial quotas for arrests, thinly veiled as efficiency targets, directives to clean up certain neighborhoods that coincided with communities of color, and internal warnings to officers who spoke out. It was a system designed not for safety, but for control. Marcus's investigation revealed stark numbers. In the past 5 years, minor arrests, loitering, disorderly conduct, minor possession had risen by 25% in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods, even as they declined in wealthier, white areas. Bail for those arrested in these targeted areas averaged 30% higher for identical charges elsewhere. One memo chilled Amelia to the bone. A zero-tolerance initiative that led to a 150% increase in arrests for disruptive behavior among teenagers. 85% of them Black or brown youth, despite the city's demographics showing no such disparity. These weren't just statistics, they were broken lives. Within 48 hours, the story exploded across front pages and television screens. Headlines screamed, "Leaked memos expose racial quotas in city policing and justice denied," the pattern behind the arrest of Professor Washington. Protests erupted outside police headquarters. Community leaders demanded resignations. The mayor, blindsided, called an emergency press conference to promise a full inquiry. Inside the department, Captain Morales seized the opportunity for real change. Olson's suspension became termination as complaints from past victims surfaced. Several other officers implicated in the memos were placed on leave. The police chief, long seen as a barrier to reform, resigned under pressure, citing personal reasons. Morales was appointed interim chief, a move praised by reform advocates and community members alike. Amelia and Solomon became central figures in the growing movement. Together with Marcus, they helped translate legal jargon and bureaucratic doublespeak into plain truths for the public. Solomon's voice carried particular weight. His speeches reminded the city that the Constitution was not just paper, but a promise, one that must be kept for everyone. The city council responded with sweeping proposals: the creation of independent oversight boards with disciplinary power, a formal ban on quotas, mandatory de-escalation and anti-bias training for all officers, and bail reform initiatives aimed at ending wealth-based detention. The fight was not easy. Police union leaders pushed back. Anonymous threats tried to silence Amelia and Marcus. But the tide had turned. The people demanded change, and elected officials had no choice but to act. Months later, Solomon stood at a community forum, addressing a packed room of citizens, students, and activists. "We didn't choose this fight," he said, his voice steady. "But we chose not to look away. We chose to speak. And together, we're writing a new chapter in our city's history." Amelia, now a full-fledged civil rights attorney, continued her work through the Washington Project, offering legal aid to victims of profiling and advocating for legislative change. She had learned that justice was not a destination, but a journey, a constant, collective effort. As for Olson, he watched from behind bars as the world moved on without him. His name became a cautionary tale of what happens when power is abused. The silence that had protected injustice for so long was broken, and in its place rose a chorus of voices demanding a better, fairer city, proof that truth, once spoken, could not be silenced again.